Welcome back. It's time for the last panel of our 2024 MACRI Symposium. With us this afternoon, we have a panel called the Willie Velasquez Leadership Roundtable. And this was organized by Gilberto Ocañas, a MACRI board member who was, I guess I would say, deeply shaped by the late Willie Velasquez. So how many of you know Willie Velasquez? All right, good, good. We have a lot of, almost everyone here in person in San Antonio, and hopefully those of you at home too. This year is actually the 50th anniversary of the organization that Willie Velasquez founded, Southwest Voter Registration and Education Project. So Willie had his hands, his feet, in many different aspects of civil rights, but voting rights was his passion. And he also, though, was a significant leader in the community. So today's panel will be talking about leadership. I'm going to turn it over to our panel moderator, Gilberto Ocañas, and he will introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to thank everyone for being here in person, also online. And I think this is recorded, so if somebody wants to go back and view later, they can. Before I introduce the panel with me, I do want to make one special introduction of Jane Velasquez, who's the widow of Willie Velasquez. And those of us who worked for Willie knew that we were a family, and we didn't know he had another family until we met Jane. So, but we're really happy to be here, and so we're going to try to squeeze the whole life of Willie Velasquez into 1 hour. So I'm sure we can do that. But you might ask, why are you doing this? What's the point of doing a Willie Velasquez Leadership Roundtable? And I think for me, the main reason I was motivated to do this because a year ago, for some reason, I got into my head, what would happen if Willie Velasquez returned from the dead and came and says, hey, how's it going? You guys must be doing great. You must have a Mexican-American governor, maybe a Mexican-American vice president. You have huge Fortune 100 companies. You know, San Antonio of course, has a Mexican-American mayor. There's probably one in Houston and Dallas, LA, Chicago, even New York. And, you know, I said, what happened? What happened to that momentum? We had a lot of momentum. Civil rights moved into the voting rights. And I think that we were, in fact, very excited about the 90s. You know, when Bill Clinton got elected, a lot of Hispanics went to Washington. And after somehow 2000 came along, 9/11, of course, but things seemed to, like, die down. And so if you think about it, do we have great leadership now? Or are we in need of great leadership now? So my goal is to say, let's examine what Willie Velasquez did as a leader and what are the attributes of what he did, and also let's look forward. How can we develop great leaders? And that's why we have this group here who can talk about Willie and his past and what he means, and also about the future and what's being done right now. So on the panel, we have Dr. Dave Montejano, who will speak in a minute, judge, former state rep, lawyer, teacher, Dora Olivo from Rosenberg. Anita Fernandez, who's a business leader, a civic leader, and part of NHI. And then we have Julio Cotto, who's the vice president of NHI as well. So I'll have them talk a little more when we talk to them. But hopefully at the end, we can have some discussion of what this important issue is about. I think it's an important issue. But first, I want to let Dr. Montejano kind of put this into context of who Willie Velasquez was, how does he fit into the history and the importance of it. Of course, many of you know who he is, and the work that he's done and the books he's written about our culture and all that. But I think it's important for us to get a sort of a context to say, why was he a good leader, and were there other great leaders as well? So, David?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hello? Is this on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Thank you, Gilbert, for inviting me, and es un honor estar aquí con ustedes. Many of you know that until recently I was in California for some 20 years, and I've been back now a year, and it's great to be back home. Good to have you back. Yeah, thanks. Gilbert wanted me to distill the elements of leadership as exemplified by Willie. And, oftentimes we focus on charisma as the key to successful leadership. And certainly Willie was charismatic. He was forceful, articulate, passionate. Certainly those are elements of charisma. But charisma is a slippery element. I mean, think of other leaders at the time in the 1980s during Willie's time. Let's take Cesar Chavez, for example. Certainly charismatic, but he was soft-spoken, and he was not really a very eloquent speaker. And he was also very humble and unassuming. In fact, his humility, I think, many regarded as one aspect of his charisma. But then take a contrasting example of charismatic leadership. Let's take Jose Angel Gutierrez. Jose Angel, certainly eloquent speaker with a brash, in-your-face kind of style. But humility is not part of Jose Angel's DNA. But what did Cesar, Jose Angel, and Willie have in common? What they had in common was a vision of empowerment. They dared to dream big and were committed to carrying it out, even if it cost them their lives. And certainly in Willie's case, it did. Willie could have chosen another path. He could have continued his graduate studies at Harvard and become a professor. Or because of his interest in diplomacy, he could have sought a position in the State Department. Instead, he decided to dedicate his life to pursuing his vision of empowerment for the Mexicanos. Now, vision and commitment, although important for effective leadership, are insufficient. You have to have a plan to realize the vision. Willie had a plan. It was so simple that it was brilliant. Organize the people to vote. And then keep in touch with the people that you've organized. Now, we drew inspiration, of course, as Chicano activists from the civil rights, from the African American civil rights struggle. And as a matter, Willie knew, for example, of the voter education project in Atlanta that John Lewis organized. And Willie and John Lewis had conversations early on. The plan in Texas was to go into the barrios of the cities and the small towns, identify local leaders, and then organize registration campaigns. But that was only the beginning, because the key to Willie's effectiveness was his immense Rolodex. Now, those of you who were born in the computer age probably don't know what a Rolodex is. We used to write things on a card that was this size in handwriting, with all the information. And so Willie's Rolodex was incredible. I mean, it included all the local leaders of the small towns in Texas, then throw in New Mexico, all the way westward to Los Angeles, and then in the Midwest, Northwest. In short, Willie had a pivotal position. He could contact all these local leaders, call them to a regional meeting, and then ask them to formulate a plan of action in response to some issue. Willie was demonstrating to these local leaders the power of collective action. He was moving them to think beyond their local horizons, that our voice mattered. So a vision, a passionate commitment, and a plan, those have to be the basic elements for effective leadership. But again, that still is not enough. You have to create an organization to carry out the plan. So Willie was like a coach, assembling a team of organizers. And some of those organizers are here. Rolando Rios, a lawyer, he was our lawyer. And he was called the Pistolero. Called him the Pistolero. Andy Fernandez, I don't know if he's here, but I saw him as the philosopher of the group. Bob Brisqueta was the demographer. Annette Avina provided support. Nacho Garcia, Armando Villarreal were out in the field organizing and so forth. There might be, I know there are others that I'm missing, but you get the idea was to assemble an effective team together and then keep them together. And how do you keep them together? You have to raise money to support them. And so Willie's major task, a major part of his work that much of us didn't recognize, involved fundraising and looking for donors. And that probably was a less glamorous aspect of what Willie did. There's one final element, I think, that made Willie important. And that was that message of empowerment that Southwest carried out throughout its vast network. Willie understood that growing up poor and growing up Mexican, we often felt powerless, unable to bring about change in our own status, in our local environment. And of course, that usually was the result of obstacles that had been placed in our way. But oftentimes, we were powerless because of our own limited horizons. We had no idea what we could do or accomplish. Willie was opening our eyes to the immense possibilities and opportunities that we had before us. And he wasn't just talking about national politics. Willie was thinking internationally. He saw Mexican Americans as natural ambassadors in U.S.-Mexican relations, and even broader in U.S. Latin American relations. And that's why in the 1980s, Southwest Voter was very involved in the immigration debates that were going on during that time, very involved in the IRCA, the Immigration Reform Act of 1986. Of course, Southwest Voter was also involved in NAFTA, in all the negotiations that led to the North American Free Trade Agreement at that time. And I remember several visits, and I was working at Southwest at the time, several visits by Mexican delegations to Southwest office to talk to Willie. And why? Because Willie had his Rolodex. Willie was in touch with all the politicians who came by seeking his favor. And then later, of course, in response to Reagan's Contra War, again, those of you who weren't around in the 80s, you're going to have to do some history reading. But there was a war in Central America, and Reagan took one side that Willie didn't like, and we didn't like, actually. And so Willie, along with Mario Oviedo of LULAC, organized high-profile fact-finding tours, delegations to Central America. As a matter of fact, Southwest Voter carried out a voter registration campaign in El Salvador. I mean, now that we're going beyond Texas here. So Willie was expanding our political horizons of what role we as Mexican Americans could assume or aspire to. Entonces, en fin, what makes for effective leadership? Vision, commitment, a plan and organization, and finally, the compelling message of empowerment. Su voz es su voto. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I'd like to get Judge Olivo to kind of respond from her perspective as a local community leader who, when I met her and Willie met her, and even to today, we think of her as sort of the icon of a local person who not only empowered others, but empowered herself and ended up in the state legislature as well. And now, at the young age of 80, is a judge. 81. Young age 81 is a judge, and dealing in a lot of issues that affect our folks. So, Dora, what would you say was the impact, and what was your view from your perspective on Willie's leadership and how it affected you, and what were the lessons that we can learn from that?
Well, you know, one of the things that I see, can y'all hear me? Okay, is that here we were in Rosenberg, Fort Bend County. I'd never gotten involved before. Just been about less than a year that we got involved. Got concerned about the elections. And we were working at them, and we were angry about this. The church was helping us. They took mock to us to teach us about social justice. Father Jamie was really astute to bring somebody like the people from MACRI to teach us and get us on the right path. That was our beginning. But then we were ready to do this work, and then we learned about Southwest Voter. And we had started a youth group called Juventud Unida. And we told Iris Galvan, the president, write a letter to see if we can get some of that money, right, the funding. And guess what? We got it. We got it. But not only the funding, we got the training. What Southwest Voter did for us under Willie Velasquez was to empower us and to teach us about how to do it right and how to get more involved politically in the community more effectively, because that wasn't happening. It wasn't happening enough. And so that started us. And then what happened is Willie, what I saw is that he never really stayed stagnant. He went on, he brought us the regional planning committees. What did we know of all of this stuff, you know? All this committee work we had and all this training that happened along that time. And for me, I saw what I saw in Willie Velasquez, and I look back at his life and I say, he was a servant leader. Those are the kind of leaders we need to take care of the serious issues that are impacting our communities, whether it's the schools, it's health, whatever it is. Civil rights, all those issues that are impacting us. We need those kind of leaders that give of themselves, and that was Willie Velasquez. He gave of himself, and he wasn't looking, he didn't have a personal agenda. That gets in the way of too many people that start this leadership stuff, that personal agenda. And Willie was very watchful of that. He wanted people that really cared about the other. And that's biblical. I mean, that's in the Bible. We are supposed to care about the other without expecting anything in return. And that was Willie Velasquez. That's what I learned from him. And that's why I love Willie Velasquez, because of that. His ideas and his thoughts are always in my heart, because that's what he did for me and for us in our community. When Willie would go to speak at our events, we had and he called us. He said we were the smallest voter registration project that he had funded. We were like the chile pitín, right? Chiquitos pero picosos, right? And that was Willie Velasquez. And so he, like I said, he came in and he gave us the tools. You know, he even told us, they gave us a training manual. We got that training manual, and it just gave us a step direction what to do in the community. It even told us, go talk to the elected officials. We didn't even know, eran puros güeros. County, man, that's not an easy county to work in. Fort Bend County, Rosenberg, Texas, la mera mata del racismo, okay? And yet we went and we talked to those people, and we dealt with them. And they taught us how to make sure that if they got in the way that we would go, we knew where to call. They told us where to call Austin, call whatever. And we did, all because of a man who loved his community, who loved Latinos and did everything for us. And we need, let me tell you one thing. If we're gonna look at leaders, there's no better model than Willie Velasquez, because I saw that he really cared about us as Latinos, and not just about Latinos, he cared about Americans. He loved America. He loved America. And he left his mark on me and so many others. And hopefully that there will be others that will follow in his footsteps.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dora. I know you always speak from the heart and also from experience. And I think what we've heard so far, one of the things of what is a great leader, one who inspires others and is visionary. I remember times when we were meeting in the library at Southwest Voter, and Willie would be there standing in front of the blackboard with a chalk, but he wouldn't write anything. He'd just tell us what he was going to say. But he actually had, I mean, I said, this guy's talking to somebody else, because he was really someone who was innovative. He thought about solving big problems. I think it's one of the big issues of someone as a leader. You have to be able to solve big problems as well. But so one of the things that I'm concerned about in the future is that, are we developing more leaders? And what are we trying to do? And I don't mean just leaders in politics, I mean leaders in business and education. The world is changing so quickly, it's very volatile. You know, AI is here. You know, I don't know if AI is in charge of my speaker here or not, but I think that we need to be moving quickly. And I wanted to invite two young leaders who are very involved and have been doing it for a very long time. But I wanted to get y'all's reaction to what's been said so far about leadership and how do you see it, and then also the things that you're working on now. Anita?
Absolutely. I know you asked us to introduce ourselves a little bit, so I'll do that very quickly. Anita Fernandez. I'm a partner and co-owner at OCI Group, a social purpose consulting firm that's based here in San Antonio and is actually started by 6 partners who met through an organization you're going to hear about shortly called the National Hispanic Institute, a leadership training experience for high school students that's global. And I currently, in addition to being a partner and co-owner of our consulting firm, we also own a development firm, and I serve on the board of directors or board of managers for University Health System, which is our public county hospital district here in San Antonio. And I also serve on other boards as an adult right now, and I appreciate that I'm young. I am 40 years old, and I will say right now, I knew it would get laughs, so I have to say it right. We got to discuss it and address it. But I would like to say also that it's very humbling. It's very emotional. I'm overwhelmed with respect as I look at the faces who are in this room, because yes, we're here talking about Willie, but we're also talking about all of you all who were a part of that and who have lived it and who are now helping and developing and growing and giving advice towards the next generation. And so know that that's not lost. I have read many and quoted many of you, Mr. Montejano, in papers that I've written. My background is in Latin American studies. Judge Olivo, I served as a staff member in the state legislature, so to hear about women and Latinas who were there, I definitely knew who you were and your work. And it's very humbling also to sit beside a friend of mine who I've known since I was 15 years old, Julio Cotto, who has been on this leadership journey with me. Right, yes. So now you know Julio's age too. That was intentional. That was intentional. So to respond, I am in complete agreement, and I will say too that I wish there were more young people in the audience today. I'm just going to say it. And for MACRI in total, we had a luncheon that I got to attend, and if there's a time, a place, a moment in history where an organization like MACRI, where the stories we're hearing about today that are being told are important, it's today. And it's not to learn the history, it's to take what was done, to learn from that, and then to act on that for the future and for today. I appreciated the outline of leadership and what you all saw as why Willie was a successful leader. At the National Hispanic Institute, we have some fundamentals of leadership that we go through. And for me, my favorite one is reflect, adapt, and execute. For me, reflection, my history. I went to school for Latin American studies, both in undergrad and graduate school, because I knew that if I didn't learn it and I didn't seek it, no one else was going to teach that to me. And guess what? That's still an issue today that we have to fight, and that you all in this room have fought before. Adapting. Those issues, unfortunately, are the same today in terms of leadership, but it's different times. We're dealing with different issues. We're dealing with different approaches. We're dealing with different technologies that, unfortunately, we can't necessarily take the same playbook, but we can learn from it and we can adapt it. And then we execute on it. I can't sit here and say we have so many issues, I don't like this that's going on, and I can't tell other people that if I don't take the accountability and responsibility myself to put myself in positions, to seek it out, to find people who will help me get to those positions so that I can make that change, whatever that position is. And I really appreciate, Gilberto, you saying, you know, leadership isn't just politicians. Leadership isn't just community leaders, executive directors. Leadership isn't just, people that you may see that have titles on executive vice presidents. Leadership is our community. And the last thing I'll say in reflecting on leadership is I very much value my family. I'm a first-generation college student. My parents did not go to college, but I knew that education, not academics necessarily, but education was a huge value for me. My grandparents were founding members of COPS Metro. My parents were involved in lots of different community organizations. I was fortunate to find the National Hispanic Institute via Dr. Hector and Mrs. Gonzalez, who are here in the audience, who put me in a place where I could start to practice, I could start to learn, and I could do it safely, and I could reflect, I could adapt, and then I could execute. And that started at 15 years old. And so we have to encourage, empower our youth, but we also have to make sure that they know and that they're included along the way so that we can continue the great legacies of those before us.
Thank you very much. Julio?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and honored to just be here and listen. My name is Julio Cotto. I'm originally from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but I have now officially lived in Texas longer than anywhere. I married an El Pasoan. And so I was thinking a lot about San Antonio because my mother's family's from Guatemala, and our American story starts in this city. So I've been thinking a lot about that more and more these last few years. Every time I drive through, of like the De Paz side starts here in San Antonio, and then we kind of spread out all over the place. And so that got me thinking about legacy is one of the takeaways. My parents recently moved to Texas. We got them all here now. We're Methodists. I'm a Methodist pastor's son. And I don't know how many people know, but within the United Methodist Church, which, you know, see the logo, there is a deep civil rights tradition that comes out of the influence of the work that you're speaking of that starts here in the city and starts here in Texas. And a lot of the same challenges that we were experiencing, maybe law enforcement in schools and government, was going on within the institutional church. And the Rio Grande Conference, which is an invention, this opportunity to create space and advocacy within the Methodist Church, starts here. And it's actually become like kind of like a retirement for a lot of Latino Methodist pastors. Because, and I grew up even in the East Coast, my dad loved coming to San Antonio because it was a place where this conversation that he was just trying to get into had been going on for a long time. There were elders that didn't exist in Pennsylvania that he could lean on. There was a context that he was studying in a dorm room and seminary by himself. Here there were practitioners of this community work. So that's one thing, and all of that work is part of what you're talking about. It influenced churches, Protestant, Catholic, it influenced so many different groups. So that's the first reaction. The second one, going back to my mom, I don't know why this morning I was just thinking about her a lot. And I was thinking about, again in the context of faith, anytime my parents would take on a new parish, the first thing my mom would do is she was like, I'm taking the youth group. Whether it exists or not, I'm going to build one then. And looking at it, I think I was reflecting on it because I was like, God, my mom's always around. Like even in church, like she's there, even at the youth group meeting, she's there. But because for her, if you don't immediately infuse that church community, that faith community with a next generation that you're already building, that church isn't going to go anywhere when the next pastor leaves. Or it's a crapshoot. You have to build. So the planning element and the teaching element, if anything, it makes me humble and pretty glad and proud to know that I get to do this for a living with youth all over the country, our Latino communities all over the place, in building communities that teach them leadership now, at 15, at 14, surround them with a community, surround them with peers. And so I see the relationship and the bond that y'all were talking about. Well, that's been Anita and I for 24 years, teaching kids about leadership in the summertime. Except we get to do it now at a global scale. And they hopefully infuse their mindset and their skill set into all of our civic organizations, into all of our community organizations, and a few will hopefully get elected too.
Thank you. Let me ask you, in terms of what the work that you've done with NHI for a long time, what are the lessons that you learned leading to today in terms of the critical path to building leadership? What does that critical path look like?
I think the word that's been on my mind a lot today, and kind of Anita and I were talking about what we were coming to, getting a little insight, is sustainability, is sustained leadership. How do we sustain it? The founder of NHI comes out of this same movement. And I think one of his immediate reflections in founding NHI is, man, this thing started fizzling out. People passed away, people moved on, people got sick, people got jobs, people have grandkids. We got to keep this thing going and evolving because the world is always evolving. And so for me, it's how do you sustain it? Because things like COVID may happen again. And that obliterated a ton of Latino nonprofit organizations. I was in San Angelo. There had been a group of Latino professionals that were starting a civic group and starting to invest in young people and economic development. I was there a few months ago. It's gone. Like COVID just destroyed the little bit of work that they had just started doing and getting all these business leaders. He says, no, este se fue a Dallas, este se fue a El Paso, this guy retired. Like, we're going to have to start over. And they weren't my age. but I could see almost the sense of wanting to give up, but immediately ready to invest in youth if that's what I was in town to do.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, I think it's the sustainability, and then it's also the resources and experiences and opportunities that young people have when they're young, right? And so the students that we work with, I was 15 years old when I started with the National Hispanic Institute, and I was debating topics like, what is the ideal Latino of the 21st century, right? When I was 15 years old. Now think about that question. Now we have Latinx, we have Latine, we have all Hispanic, we have all of these conversations, Chicano, but that was the prompt. But it allowed me to think about something at that time that if I hadn't been posed that question, I wouldn't have thought about. And so it opened my mind, and it opened my heart, and it opened my access to people, to resources, to content that I would have never seen. But more important than that, in my opinion, I was debating that topic with other people. I was learning how to have articulate, informed, passionate conversations so that we could try to come to a consensus or develop a response where we were in agreement for that. And I think, honestly, in today's climate, that's lacking a little bit, right? And I know that you all, in the experience of El Movimiento, nothing was done perfectly. There were mistakes that were made, but you learned from those, and you grew, and you made it better. And so in order for young people like me when I was 15 to be able to do that, I needed to be put in positions where I could practice that, and I could do it in a safe space. And I could understand what governance was, because as a sophomore, I was in a mock legislative session, and I was learning what it was like to pass legislation. And I was learning what it was like to, quote unquote, run for office. And I was learning how to maneuver and navigate. If I hadn't had that opportunity, then I wouldn't have had that firsthand knowledge. And yes, it was pretend to an extent, but it was still giving me that opportunity in that forum. And so that may not be available to everyone. So we have to develop, and it's our responsibility to figure out how we can create that for everyone so that they can be prepared.
Right. Thank you so much. I believe that we have seen it through our own experiences where we encounter mid-level professionals, Latinos who are the only ones in the room, as people have talked to about in the last couple of days, and they see that they're not the ones in charge. They're not the CEO. They're not the president of the company. And to me, that's kind of the main issue, where when someone has been in charge of an institution or a company like I have, I make the rules, right? And as my friend John Sharp would tell me, it's good to be boss. So I think one of the things that we need to do is, how do we make more bosses? I think Willie was a natural boss, right? And I think there was a lot of folks in the 60s and 70s who were natural bosses. They had the innate talent. They worked really hard. They sacrificed themselves. But I would like to ask David and Dora, what do you think of the things that you know about what happened and how people were motivated to get engaged, of the good things that we need to remember in order to go forward? David? Can you repeat that? Sure. Think about the things that were impactful upon you, that you saw in leaders, or that brought people together, that describe what we talked earlier about Willie, that inspired you and had vision. Obviously, someone can have all those things, but you have to have the context where something is going to happen, right? They see a problem, I'm going to go fix that problem, right? Or they see something that is not done, well, I'm going to go get it done. What motivated people back when, as you, in what you've studied, and over the long history of Texas especially, what were the things where Latinos actually moved the needle? Because what I see now is that we've been having a lot of programs since the civil rights age about anti-poverty programs, right? And we're still the largest city with the highest poverty rate. We've done a lot of programs on education, and we still have the lowest educational attainment. We look at programs, economic development programs, and we still have incredibly low medium income in terms of wealth, in terms of health, right? Now, I'm not saying we can solve all those things, but we need to sort of look back and see not everything we did was wrong, but we did a lot of things right. What were the things that we did right that we should kind of refocus on?
That was a long lead to a question.
I'm sorry.
I think there were a lot of questions there. Okay, let me take a couple, all right? And then one of the things that impressed me, okay, so you called Willie a boss, but what I saw Willie being able to do was work with several bosses at the local level. And oftentimes, when Southwest Voter went into some communities, Willie and Southwest organizers had to mend divisions within that small community, you know, and Willie was able to bring these local bosses together, you know, and it was interesting to see that, you know. Willie had a very diplomatic style, you know, and so that was one of his strengths. Now, in terms of what inspired me, well, I learned that I had skills that I didn't know I had. I mean, that was, it was funny. I was an unemployed PhD at the time, and you know, I mean, I was an unemployed college professor, and I said, my God, what else can I do? And Willie took me on, and in those 2 years that I was with Southwest Voter, I learned some valuable lessons. One, that I had a lot of skills that were important. The other thing that inspired me was to finish my book called Anglos and Mexicans in the Making of Texas. I finished that book while working at Southwest Voter. What I saw there was that Southwest Voter staff, everybody was so busy, and they had an incredible amount of material there, unanalyzed. I mean, it was just there in the files. And then down the hallway was MALDEF, and they were in the same boat. They also had a lot of materials that were just, I mean, for me, they were research. It was research. It was like, holy cow, now I can bring up what I've written all the way up until the present. And so those of you who want to know the impact that Southwest Voter had on me, read the last chapter in Anglos and Mexicans in the Making of Texas, and you'll see that. And in particular, look at a map. There's a map that I created based on the voting rights lawsuits that Southwest Voter, gracias Rolando Rios, and MALDEF, and the Texas Civil Rights, the Rural Legal Aid did. I created this map to show where all the civil rights lawsuits had been filed throughout the state, and you can readily see the impact that Southwest Voter had.
Great.
Were there something else?
That's good for now, David.
I just want to say that talking about the lawsuits, Rolando Rios, el pistolero, was there with us, and he helped us fight a lawsuit against the school district. Andaban bien enojados, school district. We had 4 plaintiffs. The school district went after one of the plaintiffs big time, and the family suffered a lot, but they got through it. But because of Rolando Rios, he went in there, worked the case, and the school district settled a fuercita. They settled because they knew we had it right. Y gracias a Dios, a Rolando Rios and all the work he did, and that was really his vision to do that. He started with the voter registration, but then he saw this, all these Mexicanos voting, they didn't get elected. He would say that, you know, give us those stories. So then in terms of what we do, it's not easy. It is not easy to work in community. I look at the area where we live right now. We haven't really done that organized and reorganized. You have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it, and it's hard. Because some people just kind of straight away, and then what happens is people get too comfortable. So that's why we need to do this over and over again, try and develop the leaders that have good values, that don't have that personal agenda, that are going to really care about the people. Let me tell you, I'm a justice of the peace right now. I'm dealing with truant cases right now. I'm seeing these kids come to my court, 10th grade, 5 credits, 6 credits. Those are darn issues. And we're saying, well, the poverty rate is low. Well, hell, if we don't get the best education, sometimes we don't get into those higher economic levels. And that's what Willie brought to us, that we can still continue that work. It needs to be done. Willie was never stagnant, and sometimes we do get stagnant. We just get too damn comfortable. Ay, no, hombre, pues ya, no, there's no problems anymore. That's what a mother told me. Oh, my kids don't think there's any problems. They're not listening, they're not looking. They're there. They're there in our community, right in front of our face. What's really hard about school districts, and that's a big issue for us, is that every school district is an island. Every school within that district is an island. So it's ta cabrón, because there's a lot of work. That's a lot of organizing, but it's not impossible to make those changes. You know, IDRA, Education Cafe, they're working on it. Aurelio Montemayor, they're doing some stuff on that, and they're there to help. There's resources out there, and we just need to, we don't have to work by ourselves. There are resources out there we can partner with. In terms of, that was Willie's vision. Willie never stopped working. He kept it on, and that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Yes. Rolando.
I'm going to say something because this is such a timely topic about leadership. When El Pistolero, see, when Willie started doing the voter registration projects all through California and New Mexico, all the way down to Texas, he would do a voter registration project, get everybody excited sometimes, and then everybody would come out to vote, and they would lose. And he'd say, what the heck's going on? Well, it wasn't about just registering people and getting them out to vote. There were structural legal problems that made it impossible to vote, to get elected, like gerrymandering, at-large voting. And he says, how are we going to do this? How are we going to solve this? Because he was a very intense person. In fact, one time I picked up his phone to use it, and the phone was falling apart. I said, why is the phone? Because he'd pick up the phone and just, I mean, he was intense. It wasn't like, pick up the phone, hello, can I? No, he picked up the phone, vámonos, no. Anyway, so it was, get another phone. But anyway, so he realized that you have to have litigation. So he goes to MALDEF, and MALDEF said, well, yeah, but we have to think about it, we have to do research and all that, and then they file a lawsuit, and then 6 months and nothing would happen. So he said, you know what? And then he took on MALDEF, NAACP, ACLU, all the power structure of the legal companies, of the law firms, civil rights groups. I'm going to get my own lawyer because I'm not going to wait around. We're doing voter registration. They all come out to vote, and we lose. We lose. So he went, and I went with him to New York. I'm talking about the Rockefeller Fund. All the big corporations said, well, how can we fund you, Willie? We've got MALDEF over here saying no, the NAACP. They're all, hey, we're the litigation group. Don't fund him. Willie said, no, I need my own lawyer. So he took a big risk, and they funded him. And I started getting involved. And at the same time, though, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, was passed, which made it a lot easier to get litigation going. And so he got it funded, and Vilma Martinez from MALDEF came down and says, Willie, what are you doing getting into the legal? It's hard. And he said, Willie, no, I'm going to get my own because you guys are too slow. Too slow. Get the phone. Anyway, I'm serious. The phone fell apart. And sure enough, we filed, at the end of the day, we ended up filing more than 200 lawsuits. And I remember one time, we filed 18 lawsuits in one day. And you may have been there. We had a press conference in Austin. And it was me, it was ACLU, MALDEF, NAACP, big press conference. 18 federal lawsuits in one day because of Willie's leadership. Nothing like that would have ever happened with, MALDEF. And I have a lot of respect for MALDEF. But they it's a different pace. Willie was into registration, getting out the vote, and getting people elected. Somebody gets in the way, let's kick them out of the way, and let's do it. Yeah.
Thank you, Rolando, for that. I think that, as I think about leadership qualities, and I'm going to stick on the leadership qualities because I think I didn't grow up in a leadership culture, right? I had no leaders around me. You know, we had a guy who picked a lot of cotton, so he was the leader in picking cotton, but he wasn't a leader of organizing us, of getting us more money for that pound of cotton. So I do think one of the things is that what you said to me is that urgency. If you don't have urgency, you're not a great leader. A great leader has urgency to solve a problem. So I think that one of the things that we need to do is develop a leadership culture, but I think I don't have the answers, so I'm hopefully with the help of folks, is try to figure out what are the things that we need to do. That's why I wanted to bring NHI here. And I guess I want to make this a discussion, so you can ask each other issues as well. So that to me is, what is it that we need to do, right? What is it that we need to do? And I've asked what was done in the past, but what is it we need to do now, going forward? Anybody can jump in.
Okay, well, coming back to San Antonio after being gone for a while, and you know, I always wondered why there wasn't something more permanent. I know this is symbolic, and I think this should be an easy thing to accomplish, and that is, why doesn't Willie have a street or a plaza named after him? And I would suggest maybe we change Travis Plaza. Let's take Travis Plaza and change that name. How's that for a suggestion?
That's a great suggestion. Anybody else have any comments?
Sure. So I think for me, we really need to ensure that our young people are developed, are spoken to, are given opportunities. You're absolutely right. The public education system is a problem in Texas and across the country, to be quite honest. And the individuals who bear the brunt of that are people of color, Black and brown kids. That's the reality of it. And so we have to understand that we need to work to still fix that system and that issue, but we have to come up with creative solutions around that. We can't just rely on that. And I think everyone who was involved with Willie understood that. You didn't just wait for it to come to you. If it didn't work out the way you wanted it, you went and did it in your own way. I think that is absolutely still applicable today, but we have to make sure that our young people know that and understand that. And unfortunately, what we're talking about right now is still not being taught in school. And so it becomes our responsibility as community members to educate, to give that. And again, I'm using education in a very informal sense. We don't have to read it in a book, and we can't wait for someone to write about it. Although we need to encourage that, we've got to do it now. And so the urgency is educating and allowing young people to have access to what we're speaking about. And then secondly, it's about putting them in rooms. I know for me, if I have the opportunity to bring somebody into a room that I'm now in, I'm going to do it. Someone that's younger than me, someone that looks like me, because that's the only way that more people like me and like us are going to be in those rooms. But that's also not something that is very common when you talk about leadership and when you talk about people who are in quote unquote leadership positions. And I think we also have to reemphasize, and I kind of started with this, that leadership means a lot of different things. And leaders look a lot of different ways, and we have to embrace that, and we have to push young people to embrace that too, and to feel comfortable and confident with that.
You're talking a lot about skills. Yes, aplauso. You're talking about skills, and so I was thinking about what is some of the work that we do. One, we spend the majority of our time talking about the future. We have a limited captive audience, limited amount of time. So if you want visions about the future, we engage the kids 20 years, 30 years from now. At least that week or 5 days we have them, we force them to try to think that far into the future and imagine what they want, so that it sticks with them. So now they figure out, okay, how do I plan to get and create that reality? I just came from a dance recital. My daughter was dancing, and people are like, why do you do dance? And why so? Because I want her comfortable on stage. I want her comfortable in front of people. Like, I know she's 9, but I know I have a vision for my daughter as a leader, so I have to put her on stage. I have to disrupt this discomfort that school's gonna impose upon her already. And so how, as a parent, but also as community leaders, do create different stages, different opportunities for them to think about the future, to learn from their elders, to learn from their community, and then also talk about their community. I think one thing I'm seeing more and more, we can get caught up in these big national conversations. I was in a conversation about the Latino vote. That is, my only point was, it's such a huge, loaded conversation. You can't have one conversation because the districts are changing. There are cities and states now. One of our big challenges, to answer that question, we need to figure out how to scale up and quick. And not that we should rush it and be haphazard, but time has elapsed since Willie's time, and there's a lot of work to do. I mean, there are cities, I don't know how many people know how Oklahoma City and Tulsa are majority Latino school districts. Omaha, Nebraska, Nashville, the county right outside of DC in Maryland. These are all Latino majority school districts overnight. Start looking at all the elementary schools. Don't look at the polls, look at the elementary schools. You've been experiencing it here for over 100 years, but little by little, every city is becoming San Antonio. And we're barely still doing the work here in Texas. I know even with NHI, we could just work in Texas all year and still not have enough work. And so one of our challenges is how do we scale up, because there's so many kids. We're the youngest community within the United States, like in terms of age. And so how do we all figure out creative ways and a lot of different ways to create vision, to create camaraderie in those relationships. NHI, I think, is a great avenue, but we're fairly small. We can't do it all. How do all of us take part in creating vision, stages, opportunities to build together?
Great. Joe?
So this is how we can start. We need NHI to get into the Alamo colleges, where we have 74,000 young, eager minds. The vast majority of them are 70 to 80% in poverty, or one paycheck away from poverty. So there's a group, and we need you to come and merge with us. You've got an invitation from a trustee. Wow. Telling you, hey. Oh, sorry, I thought my voice was loud enough. Anyway, but we are the #1 community college system in the entire United States of America, bar none. And we have lots of minorities, both Mexicanos and African American, who are eager to learn, who are eager to understand what y'all were talking about, and all these leaders we have over here, what you did in order to get us here. And there's a next phase. The next phase is what you're talking about, that our young minds need to understand. So the invitation is open. Just asking for Joe. I'm the only Joe on the board. So, but it's important because you're absolutely right. We had a different reason when I got involved back when I was 21 years old with Commissioner Albert Peña and those people. We wanted to get more Mexicanos and Mexicanas elected to office. That was our incentive back then. We had the Mexican American Democrats and other groups like that. But we were learning through them. They were our National Hispanic Institute, all of those elected officials at the time. So we gathered around them, and that's how we learned. But now that we have an actual body that has that institutional knowledge, that has that educational background, that can relate to the people we have today, merge with us. Come to our home at the Alamo colleges, and let's see how we can make that change here with 74,000 students plus, and that's not counting 5,000 in faculty. Okay?
Absolutely.
That's my challenge.
Thank you. And I will just say that, as an aside, Chancellor Flores' daughter just participated in our program last year, so he's very familiar with it as well. So we're going to take you up on that, Mr. Alderete. Thank you.
I just want to say really quickly is that one of the things we forget too often is that the greatest strength we have as Latinos is our faith. And sometimes we just hide it. We need to start our meetings with a prayer. That's where the power is, not in us. We're just these little things running around. Their power is, you know where it says, you're people of faith, we're people of faith. And let me tell you, that's what made Willie so strong. He was a man of faith. He was a man of God. That's who Willie was. That's where his strength was. And as we do leadership development, we need to do it and inculcate values into that leadership development, because that's what Willie had. Good values about the other person, about caring about the other. So I just want to say, because it's just in my heart, that's who we are. We hide it too often. We need to bring it up to the front, because that's our strength.
Great. We're about out of time almost, and I'd like everybody to kind of have one last word as we leave. And I'll give you my last word is that of all the things that I've heard, I sense the urgency, the most thing that motivates me. I want to get things done now. And the reason I wanted to do this roundtable, and hopefully others, and we can work with you, with NHI, and look at this room. I mean, this room is filled with immense resources, as you said, there was a Southwest voter and MALDEF, immense resources. Let's take advantage of the resources. If we don't, that's our fault. And I think that those of us who are bright enough to use resources and leverage resources, we should be involved and work together. So, and as a friend of mine always says, the smartest person in the room is the room, right? And so we should recognize that we have a room of really smart people that can be part of this. So we should all work together.
Well, this is this has been a great session. I learned a lot as well, and I think you're right that even though we face the same problems, things have changed. I mean, just in terms of technology, I mean, we're not doing Rolodexes anymore. So,
we'll get you one.
so no, I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful.
I just want to say that I still get angry about when I see injustices. And that moves me to do what I do, to fight hard. To fight hard.
I think for me, our community is an asset. Our community is beautiful. Our community is strong. Our community has, yes, there's statistics, but at the end of the day, the foundation is we are our own asset, and we have to continue to grow that. I think this room is a perfect example of that. And so just continuing to have hope and know that it is there and we can fight and continue to fight, and there are people who want that and will continue to do that.
I think my last just takeaway is we're supposed to usually leave things like this with hopefully doing something a little bit better or maybe something new. Find a young person in your community, in your life, invest in them in a leadership opportunity. That doesn't have to mean NHI, but find some kid, some colleague's child, some neighbor, some second cousin, third removed, that has that little spark, that, that fire, that coraje, and invest in them. Because I had great, wonderful parents, and thank God I still have them, but there were other adults in my life that helped open doors, give me some insight, ask me a question. We can all be those things we can do for free. But if you can, find a way to invest in a young leader, because that's what it's gonna require. More Willies.
Great, thanks everyone, and thanks everyone in person and online. Have a great day, thanks.